3, 2, 1.
Good morning. I'm here today to do a book review on the first chapter of this book called Simplicity Parenting, Using the Extraordinary Power of Less to Raise Calmer, Happier, and More Secure Children. It's written by Kim John Payne. He's an Australian and a former Waldorf teacher. For years, he's been a family counselor and a simplification consultant, among many other skills. More about him will be posted in the comments of this video. This book was given to me and the teachers at TMS, and I have been grateful to start reading it in this season. So let's begin looking at the introduction of this book. I'll read a few phrases for you. It starts, as parents, we are the architects of our family's daily lives. We determine the rhythms of our days, and we set a pace. It's never too late to bring inspiration and attention to the flow of family life. Simplification is often about doing less and trusting more. Trusting that if they don't have the time or security, children, if they do have the time and security, children will explore their worlds in the way and at the pace that works best for them. We'll move to chapter 1. It's called Why Simplify? And there's a quote that starts that off that I would like to read. It's this: we are facing an enormous problem in our lives today. It's so big we can hardly see it, and it's right in front of our face all day, every day. We are all living two big lives crammed from top to toe with activities, urgencies, and obligations that seem absolute. There's no time to take a breath, no time to look for the source of the problem. So right here, the author starts off with a story. Now I'm about to dive into the subject of anxiety in children with this story, but this is not going to be the ultimate takeaway point. The ultimate takeaway point will be simplifying your child's life by starting with their room. But here's a bit about anxiety. Here's a story. There was an 8-year-old boy. His parents, one of them was a professor, and one was a city government official. They came to the author for help, saying that their 8-year-old had trouble sleeping. He was starting to have stomach pains that did not seem food related. He was a picky eater, but his picky eating was increasing. It was becoming extreme. He was confident with speaking with adults, but he struggled with interacting with his peers. And he was a backseat driver, a self-appointed policeman. Even if they were going just 2 miles over the speed limit, he would be correcting them, and it was very difficult to deal with. After spending time with the family, the author noticed something, and I'll read that portion to you. He said, as I got to know the family, I noticed how much their daily lives were colored by world issues. Both parents were avid news followers. The television was often on and tuned to CNN. Whether they were directly focused on it or not, politically and intellectually oriented. They would discuss issues at great length, particularly environmental concerns. From an early age, James had been listening to these conversations. His parents were proud of his knowledge. They felt they were raising a little activist, a citizen of the world, who would grow up informed and concerned. James's understanding of global warming seemed to rival Al Gore's. That much was apparent. James was also clearly becoming a very anxious little fellow. Here's where the anxiety part of this story kicks in. As the author talked more with this family, they noticed that one of the primary focuses that they should have in helping James was cutting back on James' involvement in his parents' intellectual lives and his access to information. Additionally, they minimized the screens within the house. They removed some TVs, there were multiple. They minimized computers. They took out the Game Boys and the Xboxes. They became very aware of electronic background noises that they had and minimized those. Now, that's not to say they didn't use technology, but they became more mindful and minimized it. In the area of politics and conversation, his parents, the boy's name was James. James's parents quite bravely decided to keep their discussions of politics, their jobs, and their concerns for a time after James went to bed. They actually found that the quality of their nightly talks intensified, and they both really enjoyed and appreciated the new time that they had together. So I just want to point out that this is not to say that we can't talk about big issues with children. We should, but we need to do it at their level and in short, brief sections, not the length in which adults talk about concerns in the world. The children can't change politics. They don't need to be anxious about the anxieties that we have. So it is a good idea to downsize these conversations with children, and it will help reduce their anxiety. Wait for a moment when they're gone to talk about troubling work concerns or politics. James' parents noticed changes with him in the first couple of weeks. His level of anxiety went down and his sleep improved. James's teacher also reported changes in him. His play life expanded, his pickiness about food waned. He started interacting with some of the kids in the neighborhood, particularly one with whom a friendship blossomed that lasted for life. So these steps of reducing technology and minimizing intellectual conversations around children, and James in particular, aided his reduction in his anxiety and his sleep and his improvement in his appetite and social relations with other children. But they were not the only factors. There were many factors. There's no such thing as a simple fix like that, but it's helpful to learn about these techniques and be mindful of them. So let's see what we have next here in the book. The author tells us how we can begin simplifying our family's lives. And the author says it starts with a dream. And these dreams are the dreams that we had for our families before the children were born. He says when he works as a simplification consultant, when a family comes in with concerns for their child's behavior, he focuses on two areas first after learning about the behavior. One is the family's values, really diving in and trying to solidify what those are. And the second is that dream or that vision for the family that the parents had before the children were born. I have a story about that with my personal life. So when I was 16 and my sister was 18, we entered into a little bit of a teenager rebellion phase where we were lying to our parents about some of our whereabouts. We both had driver's license, and our family was not functioning as well as it had been in previous years. And there were consequences and groundings, and nothing was working. And my dad, at one of his work meetings, heard a visiting speaker was a basketball coach that reminded him that a basketball team functions as a team, and so does a family. That honesty and openness is necessary for that teamwork to work. And that was and is one of my family's values. Honesty and openness, sharing what we're up to, and being honest even when we make mistakes. And so when my dad was reminded of that original family value that he and my mom had before I was born, we sat down, we had a family meeting, and he gave us a clean slate, and he said, look, from today on, we are going to believe what you say is true, and we're going to hope that what you say is true. We're going to try again. We'll start from scratch. And it worked for me. For me, it was an opportunity to get back to the place with my family where I wanted to be. I wanted to be honest. I wanted to have a good relationship with my family, but trust had been lost. And sometimes it takes a long time to work your way back, especially with certain behavior issues in young children. But for me, this opportunity was very similar to Jesus forgiving us of our sins and letting us have a new, clean, white as snow slate to begin. And I appreciated that immensely, and it has affected me even into adulthood. From that day, I have been honest with my family and open with my mistakes and my activities. Of course, I don't have to share everything, as an adult, but as an adult, my family and I have a really good relationship. Not all children respond to opportunities like that the same way, but that's just an example of how powerful it is to go back to your original family vision. You don't have to come up with new ideas to solve some behavior struggles that we're all having with children these days. You can go back to the very beginning and remember what you had dreamed up for your family. So then he turns to the process of how we get started, and there's 2 points to that process. We start with what is important and what is doable. Most of the time, what is important is not attainable immediately. But if we pick different doable tasks, those little tasks can lead up to accomplishing that important goal that we are striving for with reducing anxiety and improving behavior, enriching our family's lives. So now we have hit the point of application, the portion in this conversation. And this is when I'm going to start talking about the children's bedroom. This is what the author talked about. This is kind of the first step in simplifying your life to help your children have healthy, more anxious-free lives. I'm going to read a story, or tell it rather, that came from here. So he begins this time with a child that he named Marie, who was 5 years old. She was bright, energetic, but she was hard work. her parents and caregivers said. She was very active. She was a trouble to control, and she had clear attention difficulties. She had many babysitters and busy, caring parents. One of the first things that the author noticed when he visited their homes, because that's what he did as a consultant, either days of learning about their values or a one-day observation of their home. And he noticed that her room was full of toys. He said the average number of toys that children have is 150. I don't know how true that is, but he said that this child had double. Her room had stacks of toys and books, and there were just a few paths through those stacks of toys that led to her bed so she could get in and get out in the morning. So naturally, in this case, that's where they begin, different than the other child I just explained. He needed to simplify the toys in her room, and this is what I recently did for my daughter, and what I recommend you all try if you're wanting to try some changes in your home to add simplicity. So the task was to take all of the toys and books and put them all together in a pile, and then he had one bag for broken and not wonderful toys for the trash, and then he had one bag for toys that were to go in a storage room in the basement to kind of be a library where over time you could change one toy out with another one in the room. So one bag was going to storage and one bag was going to the trash. When I did this for my daughter's room recently, I added a third bag, and that was for donation. I know my child, and there are certain, I did this without her. There are certain toys that I don't see her play with, and I don't think she'll notice if they're gone, and so I felt confident that I could gather some of those things and give them away without her participating. So that was the first step, and the idea is to leave a mix of toys that the children enjoy, that they most consistently use, and that they use for longer periods of time. So especially in Montessori, we are helping the children develop their concentration levels. If a child can sit with something for 45 minutes, they are fully concentrating on that, and it doesn't matter what the activity is. That is growing their brain and getting them ready for math and language. Anything can get them ready as long as they're practicing concentration and repetition. So leaving just a few toys, a very simple room that they enjoy, that they use consistently. And when something like this happens, he called it a little bit like an anti-Christmas. I love Christmas, but I understand his point. You would think that a child, upon seeing it, would be shocked, but that's not the case. In the book with this 5-year-old story, she didn't seem to notice. She actually went in and happily started playing with a few items that were there. When I did it for my daughter, which I actually had done it before I read the book, so this was interesting and fun to read. She didn't seem to care either, but what I noticed with her is she started doing more things like making her bed more frequently than she had before and putting her toys away more frequently than before. Not all the time, of course, I still have to remind her, but she seemed happier and she slept better. At least my 4-year-old daughter did. Let's see. Oh, what I wanted to mention too is there were a couple nights, so before all of the coronavirus hit, my daughter and I were in a really busy season, and I had kind of stopped maintaining certain things, and since I was so busy, my daughter had started taking out all of her art items. About 1/4 of her room was full of painting and paper cutting works, and she hadn't been putting everything away. And there were a couple nights that I put her to bed and she said to me, Mommy, I'm scared. I said, why? And she said, because my room is a mess. If I stand up in the bathroom, I might trip on something when I go to the bathroom. And I was too tired in that season to clean up in the moment. I'm glad that we're all set now, but that just shows you that something as simple as that can bring anxiety to children. And so this is the first step, and this is the step that I'm recommending, just like the author, that you all begin if you're interested in simplifying your children's life and helping them cope with anxiety or not have anxiety, lessen it. Now, it's an important thought about maintaining that. So he found the same thing in the book, that child, her behavior improved, her sleeping improved, her anxiety lowered just with that one move. But it's important to note that, of course, that stays with maintaining such an environment. And the best way to maintain an environment like that is inviting them to practice what we do in Montessori rooms. We call them work cycles. You take out one work or one toy, one activity at a time, and you fully and completely put it away before you take out the next. That's hard because sometimes you're building like really elaborate towers and everything. And every once in a while you might want to leave those. But if you leave up 5 elaborate towers with different mediums, then all of a sudden there's a lot of work to put away, and there's a lot of items in the room that could cause stress. So it's really important to help the children practicing taking out one thing at a time and putting it away completely before the next. I still struggle this with my own child and with myself. I try really hard to model that same activity. My daughter even said to me when I reminded her to put something away, she said, Mom, and when you take your work away, you put it away too. And I said, yes, I try, because it's hard for us to model those sorts of things too, and that's very meaningful to children. The author was really clear to point out that there are certain toys that we don't remove, like those deer nighttime toys, and certain collections that are very special to the children. No matter how old or ragged a bedtime toy might seem, those are grounding toys for your child. So those do need to stay, according to the author. And one thing I found and enjoyed with this technique I've used of rearranging items and putting items in the basement without my daughter knowing, she doesn't know I have items down there, is every once in a while she'll remember something. And she'll explain to me, recently she explained a stuffed animal in detail. And I thought she didn't like that stuffed animal. She didn't play with it often. But she explained details to me about that stuffed animal that I hadn't noticed before. Like various hearts on the front of it. And she asked if I could help her find it. And I said if she waited during the day, at nighttime, I would find it, and she would probably see it in front of her door when she woke up. So that's what I did, and that's what I do, because I don't want her to know that I'm the one making her toys disappear. But then later I replaced it with something else. If I'm going to bring something up, then I'm going to bring something else back in storage. I say this, but I'm trying to do this so that we don't return to the same state of having too many items in her room. Another thing that I do is with those like McDonald's toys and those little toys that have no value, I will hide them behind the fruit basket in my kitchen. That's my secret stash. Don't tell Rebecca. And if she doesn't notice they're gone in a day or two, I'll throw them away. So those are just some techniques that I use. But I wanted to point out that this doesn't work for all children. Some children would have many concerns about you rearranging their room or their items or their collections without them. And so in many cases, it's important that you do this process with your child. You know your child better than anyone else. I have friends that they do a toy purge giving before Christmas with their child, even as young as 3. And they'll kind of lay out 3 different objects and tell the children they must pick 2 to give away to children in need. And I don't think this would work with my child. She'd convince me to keep more than I want to, but it does for other families. And I would encourage you, if your child is very attached to many different things and really needs order, which many of them do, that this is the way you go. But just there's no room for swaying. You give them a choice of putting 2 items in the basement, and they must choose. And you can explain that they're not gone forever. You can explain you're creating a library, and later they can rotate something out. So that is a technique. We are nearing the end. I want to make sure I hit all the points because there was a lot of lovely information in this first chapter. Now, this author covered additional subjects briefly, such as the fact that Americans consume 80% of the world's Ritalin, and other more scientific details that I didn't find helpful for me, and I don't find helpful to share for you. But if you're interested in more statistics and deeper research like that, it is in here in the book. But there are just a couple more passages that I would like to read to you, and then we'll close. So talking about those children that might not do well with you simplifying their room without them. Here's an example. Imagine the child who has a bird collection or a stamp collection, his favorite things. And granted, he has quite a few of them, are all lined up on display. His room seems a bit chaotic to the outside observer, but he knows exactly where everything is. Or she knows where everything goes, and can be quite perturbed if someone cleans her room. It is more like archaeology than cleaning. She has a wonderful memory for detail and general, and will be the first to say where your car keys are and the last time you wore a particular outfit. With stress, this child can slide into an OCD-like behavior, or just stuckness, which is a pronounced rigidity of behavior. She is the one who, when the teacher explains that the field trip has been canceled due to an impending snowstorm, will melt down. So in a situation like that, that is when you partner with your child to tackle this task of simplifying, instead of doing it privately, like I chose to. A couple more quotes. Overparenting creates a lot of tension. Our anxiousness about our children makes them, in turn, anxious. Little ones graze on our emotions. They feed on the tone we set, the emotional climate we create. They pick up on the ways in which we are nervous and hypervigilant about their safety, and it makes them nervous. So those feelings cycle. A journalist, Alan Goodman, said, "The central struggle of parenthood is to let our hopes for our children outweigh our fears." Here's the closing thought. This is the last page of chapter 1. Imagine your home as a place where time moves a little slower, becoming less cluttered and more visually relaxing, with space and time for children and time for one another every day, as a place where play and exploration are allowed and honored, having more ease as you begin to limit distractions and say no to the stress of too much, too fast, too soon. As a sense of calm and security takes hold, becoming a place where those we love know it by virtue of our attention, protection, and appreciation. Remember, according to this book and an experience of my own, step 1 to a calmer child is simplifying their room. Thank you for joining